Hello and welcome to Recalibrating with me, Sharee Johnson, where you'll hear healthcare professionals and others sharing their stories of recalibrating life when the unexpected happened. Life is full of opportunities to recalibrate with agency, the right mindset, the right resources, and the right community. I don't want to say too much about this episode before you listen in. Dr. Jasmina Kevric brings all of her heart and soul to the conversation. It's really a beautiful conversation to have so soon after the Heart of Medicine at Uluru. She demonstrates, I think, in her answers to the questions I was asking her, how bringing your whole self, bringing your true self, bringing your values to the work brings other people in. And she says that a number of times, that in her efforts at advocacy and talking about what it's like for women returning to work, the need for things like pregnancy policies and policies around breastfeeding and so on, people want to join her in those endeavors because they can tell from her storytelling the authentic desire she has to contribute to the greater good and to bring things that are going to make working as a doctor easier, more effective, to collective attention. She brings so much genuine heart to those things that she's seeking improvement on, that people want to join her. The story of being a refugee, of surviving war in Bosnia and coming to Australia and going with the flow of life, as she puts it, I think is really an inspiration and encouragement to us all. And she finishes with the mantra of never be frightened to start again. I think it's a very gentle and powerful story that we hear from Dr. Kevric today on the podcast. I hope that as you're listening to her, you can feel her courage and what she shares with us about ambition and advocacy and service as a powerful combination is going to stay with me at least for a very long time. Welcome to today's episode of Recalibrating with Sharee Johnson, Dr. Jasmina Kevric, showing us the way with her heart and her clarity. Dr. Jasmina Kevric is a Melbourne-based specialist breast surgeon who also is an advocate and a community leader. Alongside her surgical practice, Jasmina is passionate about improving access to healthcare, supporting patients through some of life's most vulnerable moments, and contributing to broader conversations about equity, leadership, and community. Originally arriving in Australia as a refugee from Bosnia, Jasmina's lived experience has shaped her commitment to service and advocacy. She has been actively involved in refugee and multicultural initiatives, mentoring, storytelling, and community leadership. Her contributions have been recognised through multiple awards, including this year being named a recipient of the Les Murray Award for Refugee Recognition. Outside of medicine, Jasmina is a mother and enjoys creating meaningful conversations through writing, speaking, and social media. On this episode, Dr. Kevric shares insights on leadership, resilience, building a purpose-driven career, and what's possible when ambition and service come together. Jasmina, I'm so delighted to have this time with you. Thank you for coming to Recalibrating with Sharee Johnson.
Great. Thank you so much for having me, Sharee. This is really wonderful to see you again.
Well, we were remembering that it's 2021. We think that we're at a conference both talking on the stage, so it's way too long.
Way too long.
Congratulations on all that you've achieved since then. I think your story has so many examples of recalibrating. You are now a consultant surgeon. I wonder if you can tell us what's it like to be a surgeon.
Being a surgeon, I always say it's the most wonderful career in the entire world, but I'm a little bit biased, but I do feel truly that it is a great, great career and a job. You know, I wake up every morning and I get the privilege to look after patients who are in some of their most vulnerable times in their lives. And I get to be the one to help them through that, which is, you know, an enormous responsibility. I always view it as, you know, privilege, a responsibility, and it's something that is so deeply meaningful to me. That's why I'm such a big advocate for, you know, other people, women in particular, to join this field because it's truly wonderful.
I can't help as a non-surgeon thinking it must be scary sometimes as well.
Yeah, absolutely. Sure. It is, when you meet someone and they are in front of you and they're fearful for their life, because often, I work in the cancer field, and women with breast cancer present to me and they're truly scared. And
Mm.
so it can be scary, being scared that the patients might die because of the progression of the disease, or how what the biology is for the patient. But I feel that with a great team behind me and great patient connection, that often the results are promising, the results are meaningful to all of us. So yeah, it can be scary, but it is truly, truly wonderful job.
Mm, mm. So we're going to find out, I think, in this conversation some more about what those pros and cons are.
Mhm.
Was it a big decision to become a surgeon, or was that clear for you through medical school that that was your direction?
It was very clear very early on for me, Sharee. I grew up in Bosnia, and very early in my childhood, I was exposed to a war, and the trauma that comes with the war, of seeing death and hatred and vulnerability so early on. There were many events during that time that really shaped that initial desire and need to become a doctor, as I was watching others help and save my family members. So it shaped from a very, very early age.
Mm. It's very hard for me to comprehend what that must be like. It sounds like you can remember vividly being in
Mm.
Bosnia and then arriving in Australia. What was that like as a small person? I think you were 6.
Yeah, so I was 6 years old when the war started in Bosnia. So before I, remember that night when the bridge collapsed due to the artillery strikes. I had a wonderful childhood in Bosnia. I was surrounded by love, family, great upbringing. I knew what it was like to have a nice childhood where I didn't fear the airplane circulating. And so it was good for me to know that from the beginning, because then I was plunged into a world of uncertainty, a world of vulnerability. And so that part of my life, although it was difficult, I knew that as a family we could get through that, because I knew that there were possibilities of getting back to that wonderful sort of family life.
Mm.
Um, and when I came to Australia, I was 14 years old and I
Mhm.
couldn't speak English. And I was, I moved a lot throughout my 14 years, from Bosnia to Croatia, throughout that region, and then to Germany, and then to Australia as well. So there was a lot of recalibrations throughout that very early on life. But it's main thing that when I reflect back, what I learned is okay to start again. And I
Mm.
never fear starting again, because I know that, you get through it.
That seems like an extraordinary mantra, so simple
Mm.
and so grounding.
Mm.
Do you feel like you learned that from your parents when you were moving? Your parents were making these decisions to go to the next country or to immigrate, or
Mm.
was that the kind of underlying message, we'll be okay?
Yeah, absolutely. My parents, we were very close, and we're still very close, and they um, always included us in every decision that they made throughout that time, because it was such a profound decision and profound circumstances that they wanted us to know what was happening, so that we are not afraid or scared of what was coming.
Mm.
And so, watching my parents, and particularly my mum, as another woman now, seeing her make decisions like that, to take, two young children and, move through what we call, enemy territory to get to the safe land. It was transforming for me to view that. And that was for 5 years, and so the bravery that they showed, to me during that time, really stayed with me, and I knew that with brave hearts you can achieve anything.
Mm. as a psychologist, I feel, very clear that these early scripts, these early messages that we get become so much a part of our identity. And, I think you're using the word bravery. I'm thinking about courage as I'm listening to you, this kind of inbuilt early
Mm.
lessons of courage and the kind of the fire where the steel has been fired in a way in your family and in those early experiences. What about when you arrived in Australia at 14, no English? What do you
Mm.
remember about that time?
I arrived to Australia, um, and I saw their houses. They were quite different. The land was quite different. I was expecting a lot of kangaroos, as everybody was telling us there weren't any kangaroos. So, but the first thing I really realized is how peaceful it was here. I didn't wake up in the night thinking there's going to be an attack, a bomb, going off. But I do remember on Australia Day that when the airplane started, coming to the sky, that I was like, "Oh, are we being under attack now? What is going
Ah,
on here?"
the
So,
roulettes, when the roulettes were flying over.
yeah.
Ah,
So that was it just it reflected to me how that upbringing during the war, it stays with you for a little bit longer. Um, but it was, wonderful to come to a country like Australia. And I went to Noble Park Secondary College, which was a public school. I couldn't speak any English, of course, but I was surrounded by very similar, young people around me from very similar backgrounds, refugee stories. So I felt very much like I was at home. And we
mhm.
had incredible teachers who knew how to navigate this sort of environment, and the students that they had. And I was very fortunate to be in that school.
Mm. One of my best mates at college actually went to Noble Park Secondary School, so
Oh,
yeah,
what a
having
small world.
flashback of her there. So hello to Nat if you happen to be listening.
Amazing.
This environment that you're describing, where there are other people from lots of different backgrounds, I think very multicultural school and area. Um, it sounds like what you're describing is there was room for post-traumatic growth as well as to recognize and support and understand that there was trauma in that community as well. Did you go from school straight into university? How did your English developed really quickly and you were in medicine school 4 years later? Is that what happened?
Yeah, that's exactly what happened. I loved school from a very early age. I absolutely loved learning. And so because I didn't have any schooling during the first, I guess 40 years other than homeschooled from my parents, I was absolutely, hungry and thirsty for knowledge and to be educated for that education. And I embraced everything I was given in that school. I, studied day and night. I just loved it so much. And there was never really, I didn't know how to get into medicine. I didn't know that you had to do well in VCE, you had to get a certain score. I did not know any of that. And so when I got to year 10, I got to choose subjects and I chose the ones that I absolutely loved. And that included maths and, chemistry and physics. I was just, fascinated by those subjects. And so I did really well. And I, got a first round offer to study medicine at Melbourne Uni, and I got a scholarship. So, and that's where it began, at that point where I was like, oh, this is actually possible.
Yeah,
I can become, the doctor that I hoped to become. But it's sort of, I just followed the flow of life, really. I was never planning anything concrete. It was just a flow of life.
it must have been doing all sorts of projecting as men. It must have been an extraordinarily exciting time for your parents to think that things were working out, if you like. I'm sure there were things that were challenging as well, but that there were these opportunities that were happening.
Yeah.
Is there something that was a bit surreal or amazing about that? Or do you feel like, no, the kind of living of this experience of learning language and learning a new place every day, there's no real surprises. It's just a natural progression as you described.
Yeah, I mean, when we first went into Germany when I was 10 years old, it was very similar, where we were, thrown into that different society. Suddenly we had to learn the language. So I had that experience already. That is just what is now expected when you're in Australia. You do the same thing. You
Mhm.
embrace the culture, you take every opportunity you can get, and you learn from those around you. And I think, of course, there were challenges. My parents would go to learning school to learn English, and then I would go to school to learn English. But we always did it together.
Mm.
I think that's the key to where I am today, is that I always felt that we were doing things together as a family, and we supported each other through that. And without that, I would not be here today.
Mm. Mm. I want to really pause there. It's such a salient point. In coaching, doctors often tell me how much responsibility they feel for all the effort that the whole family has made for them in their medical training, and the responsibility of that, and also just the joy of that family and support, and remembering. I think sometimes as we become expert or professional in our chosen career, we sort of think we have to do it all on our own, and actually remembering this connection and support and the community around us is,
Mhm.
in a way, what makes it so joyful. It's what why we want to keep going. It's not the same to just keep going by ourselves. It's not as half as interesting from my perspective. How many languages do you speak, Yasmina?
So Yugoslavia is broken up into many different countries, but as a default, we speak all of them.
Hmm.
Croatian, Serbian, Bosnian, Slovenian, Macedonian, and then German and English. So yeah, it's nice to be able to use a few languages here and there, and particularly connecting with my patients when I do see them.
Right, that's what I'm thinking about, that
Mm.
this opportunity for a multilingual surgeon
Yeah.
must have great benefits for your patient community.
Mm. Yeah, and it really does make them feel more at ease, because
Mm.
have that a primary language they can default to, because it's
Mm.
often, as I don't know if you know any other languages, Sharee, but often what happens is when you're speaking, your native language, to get to the next language, you sort of interpret from the native to the next one. And so it's just, you don't have to think when you're speaking your native language. Which
Yeah, that's right. I'm embarrassed to say that I learned Italian for 6 years at school, Yasmina, and I can't speak it now. I have a fantasy of one day going to Italy and living there for a couple of years to see if I can get that going,
beautiful.
going again. Yeah. So you got a scholarship. You got into university at Melbourne University to study medicine, and then things rolled on, the flow of life, and you found yourself applying for training programs.
Mm.
And how was that process for you?
Yeah, once I got into medicine, it was the first time really in my life, having experienced all of these different, barriers that life can throw at you, kind of moving through them. But getting into medicine was the first time where I felt truly like there were solid barriers in front of me.
Hmm.
And it wasn't just, the exams, the multiple exams, and the enormous sacrifices that is required to become a surgeon. But it was also the mental load of navigating an environment where you felt like you weren't supposed to be there, is the main sort of experience that I had early on. Coming from a refugee background and getting into medicine, there was no one like that in medicine when I was going through. I'm happy to say that now things have changed. There's more inclusivity and there's more diversity. But 20 years ago, it was different. And so I felt like, do I belong there? So there was a lot of questions in my mind going through about belonging and what it means for me to be in this new environment. And I knew, that 5-year-old girl who set on becoming a surgeon, I knew I had to be true to that and maintain that value of who I was. But, when you're told by your peers and often mentors that surgery is not a place for women, you question a lot of things, and you suddenly question this new environment you're thrown into. And it's almost like, is this another type of war for me in a different way? And there's all these barriers I need to go through again to get to the other side. There were wonderful things. I met, beautiful people throughout that journey, and the patients were amazing to look after. The system was something that I felt was another type of, challenge ahead that I had to get through over the next, 10, 20 years.
Mm. Did you have any women who were in front of you that you could see? Did you have any female surgeons that you met on placement or in any of your rotations? Could you
Yeah.
see any examples of people like you?
Well, there was one woman that was a surgeon during that time, but it was sort of, still one of the kind of boys at that time.
Mm.
And when another woman, sort of shares to say that this is probably not what she would have chosen, had she another chance, sort of makes you reassess and think,
Mm.
did I have envisioned what I'm seeing?
Mm.
I certainly, when I looked back and saw those medics, save my grandparents and save my family during the time where an artillery strike happened and they were wounded and bleeding, and the whole um, scene unfolded. I never for one second thought I, as a woman, can't do that, or I saw women do that. So why am I suddenly being told, in Australia, one of the greatest countries in the world, that I can't do this because I was a girl?
Mm.
And it took me a while to sort of get through that process to understand where it was all coming from, um, why I can't perform something that has nothing to do with my gender.
Can you share that with us? What conclusions did you draw? What did you draw on to keep that vision alive? Because I have a bit of a bee in my bonnet at the moment about helping doctors get very clear about their vision, because I really feel like we don't channel our energy effectively if we don't know what the vision is. And you had a very clear vision that was now being challenged by the establishment, if you like.
Yeah, it was challenged in profound ways. But I had to get back to my roots. Every time I encountered a setback, or a mindset change, I had to get back to my roots. So I would either go and work with the community, refugee community, and support them and navigate that environment together with them, so that I don't lose that person that I was. I didn't want the system to change me, and I didn't want to become someone else in the system, or lose the passion and ambition that I had to become the surgeon. And I went and volunteered overseas. I volunteered in Myanmar. I volunteered in India, um, and worked with surgeons there, female surgeons. I saw surgeons from Japan, from all over the world, coming into these makeshift hospitals across India and Myanmar. And I saw that what was possible, that it was of course possible. And so when I came back to Australia, it was very difficult to then change and shift my thinking, because I would not believe what I was being told.
Mm.
And so that way it was easy to get through the system and make it towards the end there.
It's a beautiful story of you really nourishing your own soul. That's what
Mm.
I feel like
It
when
was
I hear
absolutely
you.
that. I had to nourish that soul in ways that um, was away from the system. I had to escape the system.
Mm.
Um,
How did you know this wisdom? How did you have this sense? What was the thing that helped you redirect in this way as such a young person? We're talking about you in your early 20s.
mm.
Was somebody guiding you? Did you have a sense that your intuition knew best? How did this happen?
Yeah, it was a combination of intuition and having friends in the field of meditation.
Hmm.
And meditation with that intuition really gave me the platform and kind of talked to me,
Mm.
and gave me what my heart really was after.
Mm.
And that's why I always say it's so important to know people outside of medicine, because it
So
enriches
important.
you.
So important. I think we can't actually underline that enough. The
Yeah.
more I go on, the more I believe that. Yeah.
Yeah.
So you took these trips. Had you got on the training program yet when you were doing this volunteer work? Were you already in the surgical training stream?
No, that was as an unaccredited registrar. And
Okay.
as you know, Sharee, those are the most difficult and uncertain years of our lives. And I was an unaccredited registrar for 3 years.
Mhm.
And so it was the greatest growth came in those years, not just as a technical skills and abilities as a doctor, but also as the mental sort of shifts and the emotional side as well, because you're encountering so much various and
Mhm.
so much in that time that you grow profoundly during that time as well.
And I imagine that you're sharing this with the trainees that you work
Mm,
with now. You had this wisdom as a young person. Now, in reflection, looking back, what's the thing that you would like people in those first 5 years out of med school to really take to heart from this
mm.
part of your experience?
I always tell my trainees to know their why. Why is it that they want to be a surgeon, or why is it that they want to, be a doctor? That is one of the most important and fundamental, knowledge base to know, because then you can use that to shape your not only your career but your entire life.
Mm.
So know thy why is really, really important. And then I ensure that they never navigate away from that, because that's their true self. That's who they are. And that's what it's going to make them the unique doctor that we need in healthcare, and staying true to that. But also being aware and being transparent with them of how difficult it is to get through this process.
Mm.
Especially nowadays where we have more doctors coming into the system, there's more medical students. There's not the same growth of training positions, of accredited positions, of consultant positions. So we have this huge bottleneck coming up. And you have registrars, unaccredited registrars in their probably some of their prime time of their lives. They're young and healthy and ambitious and energetic. And so they're stuck in this world of uncertainty. And that if we're to support the registrars or doctors in any part of their life, this is the most crucial part, because we lose so many doctors in this area.
Well, there's a lot here. Before we move too far, I want to go back to your also tapping back into the refugee community.
Mm,
That during this unaccredited time, you were also kind of going back to your roots, going to
mm,
um, if you like, your family community, your origin
mm,
community.
mm,
Medicine was a new community that you were belonging to or wanting to belong to,
mm,
but you already had this community that you were very much a part of.
mm,
And that work goes on, Yasmin, for you. You remain and continue to be, so much so that you've been awarded this year with the recognition of your work with the refugee community.
mm,
I love that this award exists. I think awards like this that actively promoting inclusion and diversity, the fact that we have this incredible resource in our community of people
mm,
from all over the world, what a shame it is to not tap into it and use it. What's it mean for you? Can you educate us about what we need to really appreciate and understand and know about our refugee community?
Oh, thank you so much for that question, Sheree. It really, I feel so much right now in my heart when we talk about this, because uh, as one this award, the Les Murray Award for Refugee Recognition, it's awarded from the UNHCR as well as in combination with SBS, and it's really recognizing someone in the community who is giving back, and someone who's come here as a refugee. And so the first thing to share is that I don't look like someone who could be a refugee. I've got blonde hair, I've got green eyes. You know, but anybody could find themselves a refugee
Mm.
anywhere in the world, particularly in this current unstable, uncertain world that we live in. Anyone could be displaced, sent to, across the world. So being aware of that and recognizing that when someone comes to Australia as a refugee, it is often not because they choose to do so. It is often, that they leave so much behind when they come to a new country, and they come often seeking a second chance, and willing to contribute and give back, to support this new home that they have. And I think it's so important that we just open our hearts, if nothing else, and allow them and give them this second chance. And I always say to my refugee community that never waste this second chance. You're given opportunities, you're given education, safety, healthcare. Make the most of it and don't waste it, and embrace it and give back, as much as you can, to shape this country into, even better place. Because I feel like together, if we live in this safety and understanding, then we truly can grow as a nation together. So it's an absolute privilege to be in this position that I am, to share this, with so many people. And I do hope that, people just, if nothing, just open their hearts.
I hope everybody's hearing that message, Jasmina, having just come back from the Heart of Medicine in Uluru. I mean, it was just so evident that all people, it doesn't matter how many letters you have after your name, that people want to be seen and heard and validated and recognized. And that when that does happen, they want to connect and contribute and be a part of something. That this belonging that you spoke about at the beginning is so vital to our capacity to reach our potential, to share our gifts. Doesn't really matter what language we're using. We all want the same thing. We want to be seen and be a part of something together. We're social beings in that way. When you were going back to your refugee community as an unaccredited registrar and tapping that vein, kind of remembering this is where I come from, or these are my people, or whatever the language was in your own heart, what did that do? Was it was stabilizing you somehow? It was stealing you to keep going? What was the impact?
Yeah. I felt like they believed in me. They looked at me and they believed in my potential. And I always felt like if I can get through this, and if I can show them the possibilities, I could draw them into that as well. And so often I didn't do this for myself. I was doing it for our greater community. If I can make it, they can make it. It was that connection with them that really, pushed me along the way.
So the other thing I'm noticing in this part of your story is the kind of reciprocal thing that you're getting energy from the community and you're giving energy to the community, and that's going backwards and forwards all of the time.
Absolutely. Absolutely. We were very connected, and and it was just because, that's where the passion is. It's just who I was, that I was drawn to that. And I had, of course, my family as well to help me and believe in me as well, because I feel like that is the fundamental for someone to believe in your capabilities, because it does give you that extra energy. So then when you go into a system that sort of tries to minimize you, or diminish your light, so to say, then you have this extra, fuel that kind of guides you through.
So you get into training, the surgical training stream somewhere along the line. You line up for a whole lot more hurdles, difficult exams and rotations and so on. What was that like for you as a young woman? You're in your mid-20s, you have been to other countries and experienced what it's like, what medicine's like in other places, but now you just need to knuckle down and focus and get through the exams. How was that few years?
Well, I was very ambitious. Everyone sees ambition as a dirty word, but I always felt like being ambitious, and then you add service to it. It is service is the greater good, and there's nothing wrong in my mind with being ambitious. But I think as women, we're always, viewed differently when you're an ambitious woman. You want to succeed in your life. And so, but I was that, and I was able to, put my head down, do what I need to do, get through the exams, get onto the surgical training program. I remember doing, a master's degree during the day and then doing night shifts at night as a surgical registrar. I was very hardworking, and I had the energy for that. So I, although you encounter all these barriers, but because you're hardworking, people around you can see that and how much you want to achieve. And also, once you're able to invite people into your story, particularly my mentors, and share with them what my journey was and why I'm doing what I'm doing, it creates um, that beautiful, mentor-mentee kind of relationships. And then I was able to have the referees that believed in me. And those are the group that supported me into surgical training. And I always felt like once I was on a surgical training, then I could finally breathe. I could just stop for a second and just breathe, before I venture into the next stages of my career and life.
Yeah. I love that you could see that and savor that at the time. Let's talk about ambition a bit more.
Mm.
Why is this word different for women?
Well, being ambitious means you're out to succeed. And success, I suppose, is viewed differently based on your gender. A successful woman would often be viewed as someone who's perhaps, more gendered sort of view, having children and along those lines. Whereas being a successful female surgeon, having the ambition to become that is could be viewed as it's not a place where women should be. So there's the stereotyping, there's the unconscious bias to come into place. And so, I think things are changing a lot now because our younger generation certainly, will, own it a bit more. But yes, I always felt like I had to portray a less ambitious part of me to the world, but still maintain that ambition underneath when I'm actually working and studying.
Keep the fire burning for your own purpose.
Yeah, yeah.
Some people say that the system was built for men by men who had wives at home who could do all the things that allowed them to work, 36 hours straight, or to work at night time, or to work, far away, or all these things that could happen with the nuclear family in the traditional kind of structure, if you like, with the man being the person that goes to work. And that now with more women, half of our doctors are women, half of our medical students are women. That we need to change the system to respond to that. Are there things in the system that you can see are shifting as a result of having 50-50 gender spread of doctors?
Yes, absolutely. Probably not as fast as I would like it to, but the real wake-up call for me of what the system, or how the system was designed more for men as opposed to women, was when I became a mother as a accredited SET trainee registrar. And suddenly, I was exposed to a different part of the system that I hadn't even thought about, because as an ambitious young woman, I never thought about children. The only first time I thought about I want to be a mother was when I met my husband. And I was a set one at that point, and I thought, okay, I would like to have children in my life now. And then it just a whole different set of barriers started developing. And they've probably always been there. It was just I've never seen it because I wasn't experiencing it. And so I suddenly realized there was such thing as a pregnancy penalty. There was a thing as a motherhood penalty. There was a returning to work penalty. All of these penalties, stacked against you because simply you're a woman. And I felt like I had to advocate for that change. And so when I was on maternity leave with my first baby, I realized that we have absolutely no data of what parents in medicine go through, women in medicine go through. And I designed a study with my colleagues and finally had some Australian data through this survey. And it probably wasn't surprising, but it was shocking to see how much over many, many decades the women were exposed to this gendered system.
And what did you find in your study? Because I know you found some things around surgical training and fertility and these parenting questions. Can you tell us?
Yeah. Yeah, so we divided that into three categories, which included general practitioners, physicians, and surgeons. But on the whole, in general, doctors were delaying motherhood because of work. They were experiencing higher infertility rates than the general population. They had more IVF babies than the general population. The pregnancy complications were very high. Almost half of our participants had a pregnancy complication. There was very little support when they were returning to work post-motherhood and maternity leave. And almost all of them said that there were hardly any breastfeeding facilities at the hospitals or where they were working. And so, that in itself was very eye-opening, to see what the women have been navigating through. And finally, this data was exposing that to a certain degree. And I remember when I was presenting it, it's, a lot of conferences, the discussions were, coming from personal experiences where women were truly sharing what they were experiencing. And suddenly we had this influx of, of stories, of data, of advocacy. And it's great that now, as a result of all these studies that we had done, the College of Surgeons has a breastfeeding policy now that we have to have breastfeeding rooms and storage for the milk for the returning mothers when they're back at work. So there's definitely progress happening. We do need a breastfeeding and pregnancy, particularly the pregnancy policy in general across the board. I know the AMA has their own guidelines and policies, but they're not implemented across the board in every hospital. So there's a lot we can do, we need to do, but it certainly was a start and eye-opening for me.
It's quite shocking. I know that if there are people listening who aren't in health, they will be shocked by this. There are a lot of lag indicators for health around, that other industries have had for 20 and 30 years around well-being and these kinds of things like pregnancy policies and, length of shift and so on, that health doesn't have. And it's quite mind-boggling to think that we're people who talk about health and are interested in health, and we don't have this kind of progress. Do you feel like there's at least a platform now that there are places and spaces where these conversations are happening?
Oh, absolutely. Yes, there's a lot of talks designed by multiple groups across medicine. There's the AMA, the doctors group, the accredited registrar group, unaccredited registrars group, Victorian women's societies. They have, fertility talks, pregnancy talks, and we have a lot of women now, more women in medicine and in surgery who are able to speak to this and who are able to advise our, doctors in training and the medical students coming through and, be transparent with what's ahead and provide some tips and tricks of how to navigate that.
I was very surprised. I won't name which college, but I was speaking at an ASM for one of the colleges a couple of years ago. And as a part of that, I did some research into the trainee programs and how many part-timers there were on the training programs. And I was really gobsmacked at how few part-time positions there were. There were one or two at fifth year and sixth year who were part-time. And that to me seemed a very basic, simple excuse me, way that some strides could have been made fairly quickly and easily. So I hope anybody who's listening from the colleges and these kind of decision-making bodies might keep moving these issues up the agenda. As well as ambition, you talk about service. Can we talk a bit about that? We're really talking about your values at some level, I think, Jasmina, that you have this really character quality that is about service that comes from when you were a little girl and your own history, your own experiences. Is it a counterweight to ambition? Can we have one without the other? How do you think about these things?
Well, I think, ambition itself is great when it's used for the greater good. I think and service is to me one of the best ways because it's about giving back. So you're creating something and then giving back, and you're using that fuel ambition to get you there. And so in that way, everybody wins in some ways. And so service, and being able to improve other people's lives goes really, like you said, back to where I grew up as a young girl when I had people in my life during the war where we were given, second chances and a better way to live as well. It does go back to, that upbringing and the experience that I had gone through and how much it improves your life when someone gives that helping hand, that service to you. And so that's how I sort of view that as a that fundamental part of who I am.
Mm. And it struck me when I was looking at your bio that it's not just a list of, accreditations and achievements, that you're very deliberate in inserting in your bio the kind of person you want to be or who you want to be known as. I just applaud that. I think it's a delight to read your bio on that front foot way of saying, this is who I am, this is what I bring. And advocacy is the other part that is there, with service, ambition, and advocacy. What's important about now that you are at a certain position in the hierarchy, shall we say, you have a little more influence, you have proven yourself through all the medical hoops to get where you are. What's important now at this part of your career when it comes to advocacy?
Yeah, I do feel like I'm somewhere now along the chain. Maybe I have, developed a wisdom or two that I can share, and hopefully, those who can change the system are listening. But yeah, just going back, Sharee, to what you were saying, the accolades and the awards, they are just a recognition of the work. I never go out, in search for that. It sort of just comes as a part of what I do. And I think
It's a natural byproduct.
it's a natural byproduct. Yeah, absolutely. And that's the other thing I share with my trainees is if you are who you are and you're true to yourself, things will happen. As long as you follow your own path and your natural path. And I think that hopefully resonates with a lot of the listeners, and hopefully they can see that in their own journeys and stories. But with the advocacy, again, I just feel like I'm just speaking about something that I've experienced and hoping to improve the system. I suppose you call that advocacy, but that's just my natural, self. And I am advocating for a better way, particularly the ones that I experience personally. And if I experience that, and if I feel that there is a better way we can, do a certain thing. For example, if we are breastfeeding or expressing in the toilets, there are certainly better ways to do that. And so, just being outspoken about that is I suppose, um, what I advocate for, but that's just who I am.
Yeah, you can't separate these things. And I think it's important for the rest of us to notice, though, whether it's clear to you or not, we've been talking about naming what is a real experience, that if we don't name that women don't get supported when they come back from having their babies, and that's part of why they're finding it hard to have a longer career in medicine, then that's a loss for everybody.
Yeah.
And if we don't name that, there is bullying or harassment or discrimination, then again, we lose people who are keen and passionate and have a deeply held desire to want to contribute and help.
Mm.
So this naming of things is really important.
Mm.
And there's a theme here in your description of this energy, this flow of energy, that when you are speaking for the group or on behalf of the group or naming something, you get some energy from that as well.
Mm.
What do you say, Yasmina, to people who feel like that's risky, who feel like, yes, I can see a problem, but it's too risky for me to speak? Is there anything you'd like to encourage them with from your experience?
Yeah, absolutely. I was asked the very same question at a recent medical school talk. There are a lot of doctors in training, junior doctors who see a problem and who see systemic issues, who want to advocate for not only themselves but their colleagues and the greater community, but that fear of the repercussion of their careers is a real concern. And so I always say, when you speak from your heart, when you speak from a true desire to improve the system, often people won't judge that as an emotional or, opinionated sort of communication. It's more that they see it as a genuine desire to change and improve things for everybody.
Mm.
And so I always say, start with the facts, always know the facts. And that's why I love research. I love research because it's pure data and you can't argue against that. When you present that in a way that is factual and you bring your heart in it and your soul and you want to see improvement for your colleagues or your patients, then people are naturally drawn to support you a bit more. And they will attract the right people to help you in that goal. And I remember when I presented my data with the Parenthood in Medicine, I naturally attracted the right people from every part of medicine. You know, we had advocates in surgery, in GP, in physicians groups who wanted to join and improve the system for everybody. And that really pushes things along. So I don't think we need to go through it in a way that we deflect people, or we want to draw people into this journey. And I think it goes back to storytelling. If we can just share the story of why we're doing what we're doing in a certain advocacy field, then people are able to understand that and are more likely to join and support you in your goals.
I'm thinking about the women that are around you now. When you see the women that are coming through the training program, what are the stories that really warm your heart or give you some lift that, yes, we're making progress? Can you think of a recent story that's really got at what you've been trying to achieve?
Yeah, I received a number of emails and messages from women from refugee backgrounds who are now becoming doctors, and they mentioned that they've seen my journey and seen what's possible. And, it allowed them to see themselves in that. And when I hear that they're medical students now and able to mentor them through that journey, it just shows me that how much this actually works when you're advocating for a group, that people respond to it and people's lives are changed. So I feel that, the privilege to be in this position, but also we go back to, the women in medicine. When I gave the talk as part of the panel for women in medicine and surgery, a number of women, wanted to become surgeons. The room was full of women. It was great. So I am seeing that shift, that change. I would like to see it a bit quicker in terms of numbers. And certainly more with the part-time training as well. I feel like that's an area that we also need to improve.
What's the benefit for medicine in general when we have more female surgeons? What's the benefit for all of us?
Well, apart from what the data is saying, that the outcomes for patients are better when they're treated by female surgeons, particularly female patients, it's really that breadth of experiences that come into the room and the different types of thinking. And again, back to the diversity of how outcomes are improved when we have multiple different opinions and different experiences being shared. And so you make better decisions. And I feel as women, we're naturally, we have this empathy that we bring as well. And I truly feel that having the empathy is one of my strongest skills. Being able to empathize with a patient who's going through breast cancer is probably more important than the technical skill that I have, because they will never forget that first moment where they were told that they had breast cancer. That will stay with them for the rest of their lives. As surgeons in Australia, we're all very well trained technically. There's a high standard we all have to meet, but that empathy that you bring with it in that room and being able to connect with your patient is more important, I feel. And so I think as women, we naturally bring that into the world of medicine.
Yeah, in fact, we know that this ability to connect with the patient can completely undermine the technical skill that you have if you don't bring that, and that patients in most Western countries and certainly in Australia assume the technical skill, that there's not a question about your technical skill. The question arises with the communication, the interpersonal skill. Yeah. You're a mum. You've mentioned you being a mum a couple of times. what would you say to the other mums out there who are grappling with how the heck am I going to go back to work and how am I going to manage all of this? What do you think they need to get around them to help them be able to be a doctor or a surgeon, particularly, and a mum?
Yeah, yeah, great question. So when I was a first-time mum, it was the hardest thing I ever had to do.
Mm.
I was able to go, get through the wall, get through surgical training,
Yes.
but being a new mum is incredibly difficult.
Mm.
And I think it's important just to sit with that and
Mm.
just to know that it's a really difficult time. It's a lot of news. Your hormonal surge is just going like crazy. You're experiencing something, you're trying to keep something, another human alive.
Mm.
And just to be gentle on yourself. I think as women in medicine, we're, high achieving, we like to get results, we, want to get things done. But sometimes, particularly during this part of our journey in life and in our careers, it's important to be very gentle on yourself.
Mm.
Um, and then from then on, get your community. It comes back again to community. You need the people around you to support you. You cannot do this alone. And I think it's never meant to be done alone. It's, it's, we all know the word, it takes a village
Like
to raise a
really?
child.
Yeah.
So I think it's just important to not feel like you're doing this by yourself, whether it be friends, family, get people around you. And then to be realistic about careers and progression from then on. We know it is slower to get to, consultancy or, certain level or hierarchy in medicine when you become a mum. Study after study have shown that because it does take you out and bring something in. So it's a balance, right?
Mm.
So get your community, be gentle on yourself, and find a great mentor. Someone who possibly has gone through that, understands how to navigate this environment, can advocate for you, and can really vouch for you
Mm.
is really important.
I want to challenge the word mentor, Yasmina. I think you're in some ways we're looking for sponsors.
I was looking for that as well.
Yeah.
Sure.
Yeah.
Look, get your
But
yeah, absolutely. Get
yeah,
someone to sponsor.
you're talking about having somebody who can champion you, who can advocate for you, who can remind people what you might be dealing with at the moment.
Yes.
It's more than mentorship, I
Yeah,
think.
absolutely. And the boys do that so well.
Mm.
They have they sponsor each other so well. I think we need to be better at doing that for
I love that you said that. Let's put like our big black red
Mm,
line under this.
yeah.
That the boys do it well. We're not talking about doing something that isn't done in other
Mm,
forums. I watched some of the men in my life, my brothers-in-law and others who hook each other up with other
mm,
people and are saying you must meet and do you know, and it's a very natural, normal thing. Nobody thinks it's manipulative or coercive or anything. It's just the normal, natural. I want you to be connected to somebody else who would be useful for you to be connected to. And for
mm,
some reason, I think women often bring a different kind of story to that behavior that perhaps hasn't served us well. So
mm,
thank you for saying that. Yes, the boys
mm,
do it really well. Let's learn from that. Let's
mm,
see if we can be introducing and supporting and sponsoring. I love that saying, that we want to surround ourselves with people who speak well of us when we're not in the room.
mm. Absolutely. That's the sort of people we want in our lives.
Yeah, excellent. Okay, let's shift a little bit. AI is taking over the world, apparently. I rail against that fairly vigorously. Is AI making a difference for you as a surgeon in breast cancer? What's the impact of AI in your world of work at the moment?
Yeah, I've been reading a lot into AI and its possibilities and capabilities, and at times it's quite scary to think what the world could look like in the next 10, 20 years. But I think it's very important to also be adaptable and
Mm.
embrace change. So I say AI, if used well, can really enrich our working environment and make our lives a little bit easier. But we have to do it very carefully, so it doesn't cause harm to ourselves or our patients. There are ways that it is improving our lives at the moment in our working lives. It's able to um, uh, create our dictation or write our letters and things like that. But also that it can synthesize all the knowledge and deliver it very quickly. So it
Mm,
does save time for us,
mm,
but it has to be done where you're still in control. Human forms are in control, because I do fear that it could escape the reality that we live in, and that perhaps it could not service us as well. So
mm.
it is a fast evolving field, I feel.
Yeah, totally. Do you see it making a difference in terms of either robotics in the theatre or in gathering the research in terms of training surgeons? If we're talking about, for instance, in your specialty, training surgeons in breast surgery, are there things that are happening kind of, from month to month at that kind of rapid pace that is changing how the training's happening?
Well, there's been a recent article about a real-time robot doing a assisting for another surgeon.
Hmm.
So things are rapidly progressing in this area, absolutely. And if we think about the administrative side of things in healthcare, I think it can improve things
Mm,
enormously. It can deliver the patient notes very quickly. It can provide that education for our trainees for better. When you're studying for the exam, you often would have to get another surgeon to ask you those in-depth questions. You suddenly have AI asking you. The AI is preparing you for your exams.
mm,
And these are all, great things. But then, we think about privacy issues. We think about de-skilling issues. Are we able to be resourceful ourselves without relying on something else?
mm,
So those are the next challenges, certainly, that we are
mm.
embracing, hopefully well. Um, but yeah, I think it's a stay tuned kind of motivation.
Yeah, nice segue. You have young children, you've got through all the big hurdles to be recognised and accredited in all the ways that you might want to be for now. Is it a bit of consolidation and stabilising kind of time, or are there next big exciting things on the horizon already for Yasmin?
Oh, there's lots of new things coming up, and so I feel like I have to utilize every second of my time right now, because it's, I probably need to put some time to sleep as well. But it's
Yes, you do. As a potential patient in the future, all the women want you to sleep well, definitely.
you tell that to my 9-month-old baby, Sharee. She's not sleeping very well right now, but
We might like give him a little bit more space before we make too many sleep demands. What about going forward in terms of the future for women in medicine and our refugee population's opportunity to access medicine? I think there is a story of well-educated people in private schools getting into medicine, that's still perhaps an issue in terms of the way we select people into medicine. Do you have a dream, a hope, a vision, a wish for the
Mm.
next 10 or 20 years of medicine?
Yes, you're absolutely right. The opportunities are shaped by your circumstances often. And I hope that the universities and admitting colleges are more open to embrace that diversity, because I do think we make better decisions.
Mm,
And now, being in a consultant level, hopefully I can, advocate for that in that area, and being, on the boards and where the big decision making is happening, and try and hopefully bring a different approach, a different way that we can practice medicine in Australia.
mm,
But yeah, there's, a lot of hopes for medicine, more women in surgery, more women in decision making. But I think it comes back to, we want the women to also participate and be involved, and, raise their hand, and,
mm.
not to feel like they don't belong. I think that is very important. The system can open up only so much, but if we need the ambition there as well, and not to be afraid of that ambition.
Mm. I think that's probably a really good place to finish. Have you got a mantra that you had that mantra early on that we talked about it will be okay.
Mm.
And you've, given us some beautiful examples of the recalibration skill, if you like, of how else can I touch what's important to me? Where can I
Mhm.
go to replenish what I know
Mm.
is true to me and what I need? Um, what's the current mantra? What's the thing that's helping you get through early babyhood life again?
Yeah, lots of mantras throughout my life, as I have experienced different forms of life. But the one that I always go back to is, never be afraid to start again.
Mhm.
That's, always served me well. And so no matter what it is, whether it's a day to day, if I, feeling like the day to day is not going according to plan, just stop and restart, let's reshift the energy and start again. And whether it be, different career goal or different life goal, different circumstances, it's okay to restart, because if you have that part of yourself and you're true to yourself, you will get where you need to. And probably the things that you thought you needed in your life, it might, reshape itself in different forms. And then when you look back, you're like, oh yeah, that was probably not meant for me in the end. This is where I am, which is where I need to be. So never be afraid to restart.
Beautiful. Thank you so much for your time today, Jasmina. It's been just a privilege and a joy. Everything that you said is heartfelt. I just can feel it coming down the camera. I hope our listeners can feel that too. So thank you for all that you're putting into medicine and to sharing with our community.
Thank you, Sharee, and thank you for everything that you do as well.
The content in this podcast is not intended to constitute or be a substitute for professional medical or psychological advice, diagnosis, or treatment. Always seek the advice of your doctor or other qualified healthcare professional. This podcast represents the views of the hosts and guests and do not necessarily reflect those of any entity we work with or for.